Is dismissing U.S. accusations that it was behind drone attacks on the world's largest oil processing plant in Saudi Arabia. A spokesman for the Iranian Foreign Ministry called the claims meaningless. This comes after U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo called Saturday's actions an unprecedented attack on the world's energy supply and accused Iran of direct involvement. Writing in a tweet, Tehran is behind nearly 100 attacks on Saudi Arabia, while Rouhani and Zarif pretend to engage in diplomacy. Amid all the calls for de-escalation, Iran has now launched an unprecedented attack on the world's energy supply. He says there is no evidence the attacks came from Yemen. But Houthi rebels say they are behind the attacks on the world's largest petroleum processing facility in Abqaiq and an oil field in Khurais. The strikes have forced Saudi Arabia to temporarily cut oil production by about half. Now, we're going to get the view from Tehran shortly. First, this report from Gabriel Elizondo in Washington, D.C.
The reaction from Washington to this attack really took on two forms. We never heard publicly from President Donald Trump on this on Saturday, but the White House confirming that he did speak to the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia. And it really just Trump was offering his full support to Saudi Arabia and the Crown Prince. Saudi Arabia's self-defense, Trump saying that the U.S. would support Saudi Arabia and also saying that this attack was a threat to the global economy. But then you saw a very strong statement again from Mike Pompeo, the Secretary of State, later on Saturday via Twitter. And this statement just really pointing the finger at Iran directly. So a different tack from the president, who just showed support for Saudi Arabia. You saw Pompeo basically coming out and saying this was an attack by Iran, and Iran will be held accountable for it. It just shows the two different messages that were really coming out of Washington on Saturday on this support for Saudi Arabia, but also pointing the finger directly at Iran. Important to point out that Pompeo did not give any or provide any evidence at all on of where he comes up with the idea that Iran was behind this. So we'll be watching that closely in the coming hours and days to see if the State Department or Defense Department or anyone else can give any evidence on this. But clearly two big, strong messages coming out of Washington on Saturday, support for Saudi Arabia, and also veiled threats to Iran, threats that they are behind this, according to the U.S.
Okay, let's bring in Al Jazeera's Dorsa Jabari in Tehran. Dorsa, what about the reaction from Iran? Tell us more about that.
Well, Rob, the Foreign Ministry spokesperson Abbas Mousavi issued a statement saying that because the United States' policy of maximum pressure on Iran has failed, they are now moving towards a policy of maximum lies. The Iranians have dismissed these claims made by Secretary of State Mike Pompeo. The Foreign Ministry saying that these kinds of accusations are actually dangerous and outside the framework of politics. The Foreign Ministry spokesperson also said that these are actually steps that hint that the United States is moving towards some kind of action against Iran. Of course, all this comes as the Iranians have said over and over again that the war in Yemen must come to an end. The Iranians do have a diplomatic and political relationship with the Houthi fighters there, but they have denied supplying them with any kinds of military aid during this war. They said that the issue here needs to be resolved through dialogue, and they have offered to hold negotiations between all sides to try and bring an end to this war.
U.S. President Donald Trump has been quoted as saying that he is open to talks on the sidelines of the upcoming UN General Assembly. What does this give, impact does this have on any hints of diplomacy now between the U.S. and Iran?
Well, I think this will just make things that much more difficult. They are one step further away from the possibility of any kind of a meeting between President Hassan Rouhani and the U.S. President Donald Trump. The Iranians have said that they are not willing to have this meeting until the United States removes all the sanctions that they've put in place since they withdrew from the 2015 nuclear deal last year. The kind of pressure, economic pressure that they put on Iran since then is something that the Iranians are calling economic war, and they want that to stop before they will even consider coming back to the negotiating table to talk about the 2015 nuclear deal. The position here is that the United States is not serious about any kind of dialogue, since not only have they put sanctions on Iran selling its oil on the international market, but they've also sanctioned highest levels of government here in place that they would have these discussions with. So the position here is that this accusation being made here now is just another step away from any kind of dialogue between the two sides.
Dorsa, thanks very much. Tens of thousands of people are marching in Hong Kong in defiance of a police ban. They're continuing their push for political reform despite the withdrawal of a controversial extradition bill by Chief Executive Carrie